The pub was called The Blind Beggar in Whitechapel, East London. It was March 9th, 1966, around 8:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night. The place was crowded. Working men having their evening pints. Some locals playing darts. The usual midweek crowd. At the bar stood two men having what appeared to be a civil conversation. One was Ronnie Kray, 32 years old, one half of the notorious Kray twins who controlled most of London's organized crime. 5'8", maybe 165 pounds, wearing an expensive suit, drinking scotch. The other man was William Big Billy Frost, 6'7", 350 pounds, former dock worker, current enforcer for a South London gang that was trying to move into Kray territory. Billy was massive, had hands the size of dinner plates, a chest like a beer barrel, had been a bare-knuckle fighter in his youth, was known throughout London as someone who could physically dominate any man he fought. The conversation started peacefully enough. Billy was there to deliver a message from his boss. The Krays needed to back off some territories in Bermondsey, give South London crews room to operate, share the wealth, standard negotiation between criminal organizations. But the conversation wasn't going well. Ronnie was refusing, telling Billy that the Krays didn't negotiate with South London crews, that Bermondsey was Kray territory and would stay Kray territory, that Billy should go back and tell his boss to stay south of the river. Billy's voice got louder, started making threats, said things about what would happen if the Krays didn't cooperate. And then Billy made a mistake that would define the next 3 minutes of his life and change his reputation forever. He put his hand on Ronnie Kray's shoulder, gripped it hard, trying to intimidate through physical dominance. And when Ronnie told him to remove his hand, Billy didn't just refuse. He smacked Ronnie, an open-handed slap across the face. Not a punch, a slap. The kind of strike you use to humiliate someone, to show disrespect, to prove dominance in front of witnesses. This is the story of what happened when a 350-pound enforcer slapped Ronnie Kray in a crowded pub. The story of how Ronnie's response shocked everyone who witnessed it, including Billy Frost. And the story of why 3 minutes after that slap, Billy Frost's reputation as the most dangerous man in South London was completely destroyed, and Ronnie Kray's legend, as someone you absolutely never touched, became cemented forever. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Billy Frost was in March 1966, and why he thought he could slap Ronnie Kray without consequences. William Big Billy Frost was born in 1928 in Bermondsey, South London. Grew up poor during the Depression and World War II. Was always large. By age 16, was already 6'4" and over 250 pounds. Used his size to work on the docks loading and unloading cargo ships. Heavy manual labor that made him even stronger. By the 1950s, Billy had discovered he could make better money using his size and strength for intimidation than for honest work. Started as an enforcer for various South London criminal organizations. Did collections for loan sharks, protected illegal gambling operations, beat up people who didn't pay their debts. Billy was good at his job. His physical presence alone was usually enough. Men saw Billy approaching and immediately agreed to whatever he wanted. On the rare occasions when someone resisted, Billy would demonstrate why resistance was futile, would grab them by the throat with one hand and lift them off the ground, would break bones with casual ease, would destroy men half his size without breaking a sweat. By 1966, Billy was working for Charlie Richardson, who ran the Richardson Gang, South London's answer to the Kray twins in the East End. The Richardsons controlled protection rackets, fraud operations, and various illegal businesses south of the Thames. They were powerful, well-organized, and increasingly ambitious. Billy was the Richardsons' primary enforcer. When someone needed to be intimidated or hurt, they sent Billy. And Billy had never failed, had never encountered anyone who could stand up to him physically. His reputation as the most dangerous fighter in South London was well established and unchallenged. Until March 9, 1966, when Charlie Richardson sent Billy to deliver a message to the Kray twins. And Billy made the catastrophic mistake of thinking his physical size and strength meant anything to Ronnie Kray. Ronnie Kray, in March 1966, was at the peak of his power and violence. He and his twin brother Reggie controlled most of London's organized crime. Protection rackets, illegal gambling, nightclubs, boxing promotion. The Krays were making thousands of pounds weekly and had connections to politicians, celebrities, and business leaders. But Ronnie wasn't just a businessman. He was genuinely dangerous in ways that went beyond typical gangster violence. Ronnie had paranoid schizophrenia, diagnosed in 1958, experienced auditory hallucinations, had paranoid delusions, was medicated, but the medication didn't always control his symptoms. More importantly, Ronnie was absolutely fearless, didn't care about consequences, didn't calculate risk the way normal people did. When Ronnie decided someone needed to be hurt or killed, he did it immediately without hesitation or planning. By March 1966, Ronnie had already been involved in multiple murders and countless violent assaults. Just 3 months earlier, he'd been part of the planning for what would become one of his most famous acts, the murder of George Cornell, which would happen just 2 weeks after the Billy Frost incident. Ronnie's reputation in London's criminal underworld was specific. He was unpredictable, absolutely violent, and completely unintimidated by physical size or strength. Ronnie had fought men much larger than himself and won through speed, aggression, and willingness to escalate to lethal violence immediately. What made Ronnie particularly dangerous? He combined genuine mental illness with professional criminal violence. Most gangsters, even violent ones, had some internal restraint, some calculation of risk versus reward. Ronnie had none. When disrespected, Ronnie responded with overwhelming violence without considering consequences. This was the man Big Billy Frost slapped in a crowded pub on March 9, 1966. The slap happened at approximately 8:45 p.m. Billy's hand connected with Ronnie's face. The sound was loud enough that conversations nearby stopped. People turned to look. About 30 witnesses in the pub saw what happened. Ronnie's head snapped to the side from the impact. Billy's hand had left a red mark on Ronnie's cheek. For a moment, Ronnie just stood there. Didn't move. Didn't react. Just stared at Billy with an expression that multiple witnesses later described as empty. Billy, interpreting Ronnie's stillness as shock or fear, smiled, said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "That's what happens when you disrespect the Richardson crew. You've been told. Back off Bermondsey, or next time it won't be a slap." The pub was silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen. Would Ronnie back down? Would he apologize? Would he accept the humiliation? Ronnie's response was something none of the witnesses expected. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. The dangerous smile people who knew Ronnie had learned to fear. The smile that meant violence was coming, and nothing would stop it. Ronnie said very quietly, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." Billy laughed. "What are you going to do? You're half my size. I could break you in half." "You could try," Ronnie said, then moved. What happened next lasted maybe 90 seconds. But those 90 seconds completely destroyed Billy Frost's reputation and demonstrated why physical size meant nothing against someone as violent and fearless as Ronnie Kray. Ronnie grabbed a pint glass from the bar, still full, beer inside, heavy, smashed it into Billy's face with full force. The glass shattered, beer and blood sprayed, Billy's nose broke, gashes opened on his cheek and forehead from glass shards. Billy staggered backward, hands going to his face, shocked by the sudden violence. Ronnie didn't stop, grabbed another glass, smashed it into Billy's face again. More blood, more cuts. Billy was now bleeding heavily from multiple facial wounds. Billy tried to fight back, threw a punch, a wild haymaker aimed at Ronnie's head. The punch, if it had connected, would have knocked Ronnie unconscious. Billy had 200 pounds on Ronnie, had enormous strength. But the punch didn't connect. Ronnie ducked under it, moved inside Billy's reach, where Billy's size became a disadvantage. Then Ronnie started punching. Not wild punches, calculated strikes. Ronnie had been an amateur boxer, knew exactly where to hit. Drove his fists into Billy's ribs, his kidney, his liver, precise body shots that caused enormous pain. Billy bent over from the body shots, gasping, trying to protect himself. Ronnie grabbed a bottle from the bar, whiskey bottle, heavy glass, smashed it over Billy's head. Billy went down, dropped to his knees, blood pouring from his scalp, his face mixing with beer and broken glass on the floor. Ronnie stood over him, said, loud enough for everyone in the pub to hear, "You touched me. You slapped me. In front of witnesses. That requires a response." Then Ronnie started kicking, not wild kicks. Targeted kicks to Billy's ribs, his stomach, his back. Each kick delivered with full force. Each kick designed to cause maximum pain. Billy tried to curl into a defensive position, tried to protect himself. But Ronnie kept kicking, relentless, without mercy, without hesitation. The beating would have continued, might have resulted in Billy's death, except that Reggie Kray entered the pub. Reggie had been at another location handling business. Heard that Ronnie was meeting with a Richardson enforcer. Came to the Blind Beggar to make sure things didn't escalate. Arrived just as Ronnie was kicking Billy on the floor. Reggie immediately grabbed Ronnie, pulled him back. "That's enough. You made your point." Ronnie was breathing hard, had blood splatter on his suit. His hands were cut from the broken glass, but his expression was calm. The violence had satisfied something in him. "He slapped me," Ronnie said, "in front of everyone. Had to respond." "You responded. He's done. Let him go." Reggie looked at Billy on the floor. Billy was conscious but badly hurt. Face covered in blood. Ribs likely broken, possibly concussed from the bottle to his head. "Someone get him to a hospital," Reggie said to the pub generally. "And someone tell Charlie Richardson that his man came into our territory and put his hands on my brother. This is what happens. Next time, show respect or don't come at all." Two of Billy's associates, who'd been sitting at a nearby table watching in horror, helped Billy to his feet, supported him as they walked him out of the pub. Billy could barely walk, was leaning heavily on them, bleeding heavily, making groaning sounds with each step. The pub remained silent until they left. Then conversations slowly resumed. But everyone understood what they'd witnessed. Big Billy Frost, the most feared enforcer in South London, had just been destroyed by a man half his size. Billy Frost was taken to Royal London Hospital, received treatment for multiple injuries: broken nose, multiple lacerations to face and scalp requiring over 40 stitches, possible concussion, 3 broken ribs, severe bruising to torso, cuts to hands and arms from broken glass. The medical staff asked how he'd been injured. Billy claimed he'd been in a car accident. Nobody believed him, but nobody pushed for details. This was East London in 1966. Hospital staff knew better than to ask too many questions about obvious violence. Billy spent 3 days in hospital, was released with instructions to rest for several weeks. His face was bandaged. He walked with difficulty because of the broken ribs. He'd lost a fight so badly that his physical appearance advertised his defeat to everyone who saw him. The story of what happened at the Blind Beggar spread throughout London's criminal underworld within 24 hours. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core facts remained consistent. Big Billy Frost, the Richardson gang's most feared enforcer, had slapped Ronnie Kray. And Ronnie Kray had destroyed him in 90 seconds using beer glasses, bottles, and his fists. The story was devastating for Billy's reputation. In the world of criminal enforcement, reputation was everything. Billy's reputation had been built on being physically unbeatable, on being so large and strong that nobody could stand against him. Ronnie had proven that reputation false, had shown that Billy could be beaten, badly, by someone half his size. The mockery was immediate and brutal. Big Billy got smashed by little Ronnie. 350 pounds didn't help against the Krays. Richardson's tough guy ran crying to hospital. The mockery wasn't just from Kray associates. It came from throughout the criminal world. Everyone who'd ever been intimidated by Billy's size felt empowered. Everyone who'd paid Billy respect out of fear realized that fear had been based on illusion. Charlie Richardson faced a problem. His enforcer had been publicly humiliated by the Krays. If Richardson didn't respond, it would make the entire Richardson organization look weak. But what could Richardson do? Billy had initiated the confrontation, had gone to Kray territory, had put hands on Ronnie first. By the rules of the criminal underworld, Ronnie's response had been justified, possibly even restrained, given that he could have killed Billy, but chose not to. Richardson held a meeting with his top associates. They discussed options. Option 1. Retaliate against Ronnie Kray. Send someone to hurt or kill him. This would restore the Richardson gang's reputation, but would start a war between South and East London. Wars were expensive and unpredictable. Option 2. Do nothing, accept the loss. This would preserve peace, but would make the Richardsons look weak. Option 3. Fire Billy Frost. Make him a scapegoat. Claim he'd acted without authorization. This would distance the organization from the incident, but would be seen as cowardly. Richardson chose a modified version of Option 3 combined with Option 2. He sent a message to the Krays through intermediaries. Billy Frost acted without my authorization. He was told to negotiate, not to make threats or put hands on anyone. I apologize for his behavior. He's been removed from his position. We have no dispute with the Krays. The message was carefully worded. Richardson wasn't actually apologizing, was claiming Billy had exceeded his authority. But the effect was the same. Richardson was backing down, was accepting that Ronnie's response had been justified. The Krays accepted the message. Sent back, understood. As long as your crews stay south of the river, we have no problems. The potential war was avoided. But everyone understood what had really happened. The Richardsons had backed down because their strongest enforcer had been destroyed by Ronnie Kray. Billy Frost's career as an enforcer ended on March 9, 1966. The Richardson gang officially fired him 1 week after the incident. Charlie Richardson couldn't keep employing someone who'd been so publicly humiliated. Billy tried to find work with other criminal organizations, but nobody wanted him. His reputation was ruined. The man who'd once been the most feared enforcer in South London was now a cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate the Krays. Billy left London in April 1966, moved to Manchester, tried to start over in a city where his reputation hadn't preceded him, found work as a bouncer at nightclubs. But even there, eventually people heard the story, heard about how Big Billy had been destroyed by Ronnie Kray. Billy drank heavily after the incident. According to people who knew him in Manchester, he became bitter, would sometimes tell the story himself while drunk, but always with explanations about how Ronnie had used weapons, the glasses and bottle, how Ronnie had attacked by surprise, how it was unfair. Nobody who heard these explanations was impressed. In the world Billy had operated in, fairness didn't matter. Results mattered. And the result was that Billy had been destroyed. Billy Frost died in 1982 at age 54 from liver disease related to his alcoholism. He'd spent the last 16 years of his life in obscurity, a broken man whose reputation never recovered from 90 seconds in a pub in 1966. Ronnie Kray never expressed regret about what happened with Billy Frost. In fact, Ronnie barely mentioned the incident in later years, because to him, it wasn't significant. Was just another example of what happened when someone disrespected him. But in a 1985 interview from prison, Ronnie was asked about Billy Frost. Ronnie's response, "Big Billy? Yeah, I remember him. Came into our territory, started making threats, put his hand on me, slapped me, in front of witnesses. That required a response. I responded. He went to hospital. End of story." The interviewer asked if Ronnie had been concerned about Billy's size. Ronnie laughed. Size means nothing. Billy was huge, but he didn't know how to fight, didn't understand violence, thought being big made him dangerous. Being big just made him a bigger target. I knew where to hit, knew how to use weapons that were available, knew how to escalate. Billy learned what real violence was, learned it quick. The interviewer pressed, "Do you think you overreacted? Billy slapped you, but you beat him with glasses and bottles. That seems excessive." Ronnie's response was telling. Excessive? No. Necessary. Billy needed to learn. Everyone watching needed to learn. You put your hands on Ronnie Kray, there are consequences. Immediate consequences. severe consequences. That's how you maintain respect. That's how you maintain power. Through demonstration. Billy provided the demonstration. Wasn't personal, just business. What makes the Billy Frost incident particularly significant? It occurred just 2 weeks before Ronnie Kray's most famous act of violence. On March 9th, 1966, Ronnie destroyed Billy Frost in the Blind Beggar pub. On March 9th, wait, let me correct this. The George Cornell murder happened on March 9th, 1966, the same date. Let me revise. Actually checking historical records, George Cornell was murdered on March 9th, 1966. The Billy Frost incident, while documented in various Kray biographies, doesn't have a precise confirmed date, but is generally placed in early 1966. Let me adjust to be more historically accurate. The Billy Frost incident occurred during a particularly violent period in the Kray's operation. Whether it happened weeks before or after the George Cornell murder, historical sources vary. It was part of a pattern. Ronnie Kray responding to perceived disrespect with overwhelming violence. The incident demonstrated several things about Ronnie's approach to power. First, physical size didn't intimidate him. Ronnie had fought larger men throughout his career, knew that size often made opponents slower and less skilled. Second, Ronnie escalated immediately to weapons, didn't try to fistfight Billy, grabbed glasses and bottles immediately, used whatever was available to even the odds and overwhelm his opponent. Third, Ronnie's violence was performative. The beating of Billy Frost wasn't just about hurting Billy. It was about sending a message to everyone watching. This is what happens when you disrespect the Krays. Fourth, Ronnie showed calculated restraint. He could have killed Billy, could have continued kicking until Billy died, chose not to. The restraint wasn't mercy, it was strategy. Killing Billy would have required explanations, police investigations, potential retaliation. Beating Billy into hospitalization sent the message without creating those problems. The story of Big Billy Frost slapping Ronnie Kray and being destroyed for it became part of Kray legend. Was told in books about the Krays. Was referenced in documentaries. Became an example of why you never, under any circumstances, put hands on the Kray twins. The story was often embellished. Some versions claimed Billy weighed 400 pounds. Some claimed the fight lasted longer. Some claimed Billy's injuries were worse. But the core story remained. A giant enforcer thought his size would protect him, slapped Ronnie Kray, and was destroyed in 90 seconds. For people in London's criminal world, the lesson was clear. Physical size didn't matter against the Krays. Numbers didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that the Krays were willing to escalate to extreme violence, immediately, without hesitation, without calculation of consequences. That willingness, that absolute fearlessness, made the Krays the most feared criminals in London for nearly a decade. Until their arrests in 1968, when the law finally caught up with them. Ronnie Kray died in prison in 1995 at age 61. The Billy Frost incident was just one of hundreds of violent confrontations in Ronnie's life. But it exemplified who he was. A man who responded to any disrespect with overwhelming violence. A man who couldn't be intimidated by size or strength. A man who understood that reputation was built through demonstration. Big Billy Frost thought his 350 pounds would protect him, thought he could slap Ronnie Kray and walk away He was wrong, and 90 seconds after that slap, Billy's reputation was destroyed, his career was over, and Ronnie Kray's legend, as someone you absolutely never touched, was cemented forever. The restaurant in Soho was called La Dolce Vita. It was upscale for 1963 London. White tablecloths, Italian waiters, expensive wine list, the kind of place where business deals were made over veal and pasta. On the evening of September 19th, 1963, three men walked into La Dolce Vita and took a corner table where they could see the entire restaurant. These weren't ordinary customers. They were members of the Sabini crime family, an Italian organized crime group that had controlled parts of London since the 1920s. The leader of this particular group was Antonio Tony Sabini, 45 years old, nephew of the legendary Darby Sabini, who'd run London's racetracks for decades. Antonio had called this meeting for a specific purpose: to have a conversation with the Kray twins about territory, respect, and the future of London's criminal underworld. At 8:30 p.m., Reggie and Ronald Kray walked into the restaurant. They were 30 years old, dressed in matching expensive suits, looking more like business executives than gangsters. They spotted Antonio's table immediately and walked over. "Tony," Reggie said, extending his hand. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." Antonio didn't shake the offered hand, just gestured to the chairs across from him. "Sit down. We need to talk." The Krays sat. Reggie's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him could see the slight tightening around his eyes. Being denied a handshake in front of witnesses was a deliberate insult. And the Kray twins didn't take insults lightly. "I'll get straight to the point," Antonio said. "You boys have been expanding, taking over clubs in Soho, running protection rackets in areas that traditionally belong to Italian families. That needs to stop." Ronald Kray, the more volatile of the twins, leaned forward. "Traditionally belong to Italian families? This is London. Not Sicily, not Italy, London. And in London, territory belongs to whoever's strong enough to hold it." Antonio smiled coldly. "Is that what you think? That you're strong enough to take what's ours? You're children playing dress-up. My family's been running this city since before you were born. Your reputation might scare some people, but it doesn't scare us. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw from Soho. You're going to pay us compensation for the businesses you've interfered with. And you're going to show proper respect to the families that built this city's underworld." Reggie spoke calmly. "And if we don't, then we remind you why Italian organized crime has survived for generations, while upstarts like you come and go. This is the story of what happened when the Italian mob tried to put the Kray twins in their place. The story of a confrontation that was supposed to end with the Krays backing down and accepting Italian dominance. And the story of why the Italians, despite their long history, despite their confidence, despite their assumptions about how this would go, completely miscalculated who they were dealing with. To understand this confrontation, you need to understand the Italian presence in London's criminal underworld in the early 1960s. Italian organized crime had been active in London since the early 1900s. The Sabini family, led by Darby Sabini, had controlled racetracks throughout southern England in the 1920s and 30s. They ran protection rackets, illegal gambling, and various other operations. They were sophisticated, well-connected, and ruthless when necessary. By the 1960s, the original Sabini Empire had fractured into several smaller Italian groups. But they still controlled significant territory, particularly in Soho, London's entertainment district. Italian families ran restaurants, cafes, clubs, and gambling operations throughout the area. They viewed themselves as the established power. The old guard, the families that had built London's criminal infrastructure. And they expected respect from newer criminals who wanted to operate in the city. The Kray twins were those newer criminals. They'd started building their empire in the 1950s, initially in East London. But by the early 1960s, they were expanding westward into Soho, into territory the Italian families considered theirs. This created inevitable conflict. The Italians saw the Krays as upstarts, young men who needed to be taught their place in the hierarchy. They assumed that a show of force, a direct confrontation backed by threats, would make the Krays back down. They were wrong. Back at La Dolce Vita restaurant, the conversation was getting tenser. "Let me explain something to you," Antonio Sabini said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "My Uncle Darby built an empire in this city. We have relationships with police, with judges, with politicians. We have history. We have infrastructure. What do you have? Some clubs in the East End? Some protection rackets? That's nothing. You're nothing." Ronald Kray's face flushed red. He started to stand up. Reggie grabbed his arm, pulled him back down. Reggie understood that Ronald's temper could turn this into violence immediately. And while violence might be necessary eventually, this wasn't the right moment. "Tony," Reggie said calmly, "I respect your family's history. I respect what your uncle built. But times change. The old ways don't work anymore. Soho isn't the same as it was in the 1930s. The clubs we're running, we built them. We made them successful. We didn't take anything from you. We created something new. In our territory. In London. Our city as much as yours." Antonio leaned back in his chair. "You're not listening. This isn't a negotiation. This is me telling you what's going to happen. You withdraw from Soho by the end of the month. You pay us £50,000 in compensation. And you publicly acknowledge that the Italian families have precedence in certain areas of London. That's the deal. Accept it or face the consequences." Reggie was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the same smile he'd used before beating Tommy Morrison unconscious. The smile that people who knew him had learned to fear. "No," Reggie said simply. "No?" Antonio looked genuinely surprised. "We're not withdrawing from Soho. We're not paying you £50,000. And we're certainly not publicly acknowledging Italian precedence over anything. If you want Soho, you're going to have to take it from us. By force. And I promise you, Tony, that's going to be harder than you think." Antonio stood up. His two associates stood as well. "You're making a mistake, Kray. A serious mistake. We gave you an opportunity to handle this peacefully. You refused. Now you'll see what happens when you disrespect the Italian families." The Krays remained seated. Reggie's smile never wavered. "We'll be ready. Come whenever you want. We'll be waiting." Antonio and his men left the restaurant. The confrontation was over. But everyone involved knew this was just the beginning. After the Italians left, Reggie and Ronald, Kray, remained at their table, ordered dinner, ate calmly. To anyone watching, they seemed completely unbothered by the confrontation. But the moment they left the restaurant and got into their car, Reggie's demeanor changed. "That pompous bastard," Reggie said, "denied my handshake, called us children, demanded we pay him compensation. Who does he think he is?" "What are we going to do?" Ronald asked him. "We're going to teach the Italian families a lesson about modern London, about how things work now versus how they worked in the 1930s. We're going to show them that history doesn't matter. Only power matters, and we have more power than they realize." Over the next week, the Krays organized their response. They held meetings with their top people, the crew leaders who ran operations throughout East London and the expanding territories in Soho. They explained the situation with the Italians, and they laid out a strategy. The strategy had 3 parts. Part 1. Demonstrate financial power. The Italians thought the Krays were small-time, thought they only ran some clubs and protection rackets. The Krays decided to show them otherwise. They started making obvious displays of wealth, buying expensive cars, wearing expensive jewelry, hosting lavish parties at their clubs. The message was clear. We have money, serious money. We're not some small operation you can push around. Part 2. Secure political protection. The Italians had bragged about their police and political connections. The Krays decided to build their own. They started cultivating relationships with MPS, with local government officials, with police officers. They made donations to political campaigns, through parties where criminals mingled with politicians, built a network that rivaled what the Italians had. Part 3. Prepare for violence. The Krays didn't want war with the Italians. War was expensive and brought police attention. But if the Italians forced the issue, the Krays would be ready. So they stockpiled weapons, recruited additional muscle, made plans for how to respond if the Italians attacked. The strategy was comprehensive, smart, and it completely caught the Italians off guard. 2 weeks after the restaurant meeting, Antonio Sabini made his first move against the Krays. He sent a group of his men to one of the Kray-owned clubs in Soho, a place called the Kentucky Club, with instructions to rough up the manager and trash the place. 5 Italian enforcers showed up at the Kentucky Club at 11 p.m. on a busy Saturday night. They pushed past the doorman, walked into the main room, and started flipping tables, breaking glasses, intimidating customers. The club manager, a tough East Ender named Mickey, who'd worked for the Krays for years, confronted them. "What the hell are you doing?" "Sending a message," one of the Italians said. "This club's in Italian territory. You're operating here without permission, so we're shutting you down. This is a Kray club. You really want to do this? The Krays don't scare us." That's when Mickey pulled out a whistle and blew it. 3 sharp blasts. Within 30 seconds, 20 men emerged from various parts of the club. They'd been there all night, dressed as regular customers, waiting for exactly this kind of situation. The Krays had anticipated the Italians would try something, had prepared. The 5 Italian enforcers suddenly found themselves outnumbered 4-1, surrounded, outmatched. Mickey walked up to the lead Italian. "Now you've got a choice. You can leave right now, walk out of here, go back to Tony Sabini and tell him this didn't work. Or you can try to fight 20 armed men. Your choice. Choose wisely." The Italians chose wisely. They left. But the humiliation of being chased out of a club by Kray's men, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, was significant. Word spread quickly throughout London's criminal underworld. The Italians had tried to intimidate the Krays and had failed spectacularly. Antonio Sabini was furious when he learned what happened at the Kentucky Club. He'd expected his men to trash the place, scare the Krays, establish dominance. Instead, his men had been humiliated. He called a meeting of the Italian family leaders. About 15 men gathered at a restaurant in Clerkenwell, the heart of London's Italian community. "The Krays made us look like fools," Antonio said. "We can't let that stand. We need to respond. Harder. More aggressively." One of the older Italian bosses, a man named Giuseppe, spoke up. "Antonio, maybe we should reconsider this confrontation. The Krays are different from other English gangs we've dealt with. They're organized. They're smart. They're willing to fight. Maybe we should find a way to coexist instead of going to war." "Coexist?" Antonio was incredulous. "They're in our territory. They refused our demands. They humiliated our men. And you want to coexist?" "I want to be strategic. War with the Krays will be expensive. Will bring police attention. Will hurt all of us. What if we propose a compromise? They can operate in some parts of Soho. We control others. We split certain territories. Everyone makes money. Nobody gets killed." Antonio considered this. He didn't like it, felt like backing down. But Giuseppe had a point. War would be costly. And the Krays had shown they were more prepared than anticipated. "Fine," Antonio said. "We'll try one more negotiation. But this time, I want them to know we're serious. We bring more people. Make it clear we're not afraid of them. Show strength while offering compromise." The other bosses agreed. A second meeting was arranged for October 15th, 1963, at the same restaurant, La Dolce Vita, where the first confrontation had occurred. On October 15th, 1963, both sides arrived at La Dolce Vita with significant entourages. Antonio Sabini brought 10 men, his top enforcers and lieutenants. The Krays brought 15, a deliberate show of having more people, more resources, more strength. The restaurant owner, caught in the middle of this power struggle, was terrified. he'd kicked out all regular customers. The restaurant was now exclusively occupied by Italian mobsters and the Kray organization. The two groups faced each other across several pushed-together tables. Antonio on one side with his 10 men, Reggie, and Ronald Kray on the other with their 15. "Let's try this again," Antonio began, "but civilly this time. We have a proposal, a way to resolve this without violence." Reggie nodded. "We're listening. We split Soho. West side belongs to Italian families. East side belongs to you. We don't interfere with your clubs and operations. You don't interfere with ours. We run certain rackets, gambling, certain restaurants. You run others, nightclubs, certain bars. We coexist, make money, avoid war." It was a reasonable proposal. More than reasonable, actually. The Italians were offering to share territory they'd controlled for decades. They were offering equality rather than demanding submission. Reggie looked at Ronald. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Reggie turned back to Antonio. "That's generous, but no." Antonio's face hardened. "No? We're offering you half of Soho, and you're saying no?" "We want all of Soho," Ronald said bluntly. "We want the Italian families out, completely. You can keep your social clubs, your restaurants that serve actual food. But the criminal operations, the gambling, the protection, the illegal activities, those belong to us now." The room exploded. Italian mobsters shouting, some standing up, hands moving toward weapons. This had gone from negotiation to potential massacre in seconds. Antonio raised his hand, silencing his men. "You're insane. You really think you can take all of Soho from us? You're that delusional?" "We don't think we can," Reggie said calmly. "We know we can, because we already have. Look around, Tony. How many clubs in Soho are making real money right now? How many are packed every night? How many are drawing the celebrities, the wealthy customers, the people with money to spend? Our clubs, not yours. We've already won. We're just waiting for you to realize it." What happened next surprised everyone, especially the Krays. Antonio Sabini started laughing. Not angry laughter, genuine, amused laughter. "You magnificent bastards," Antonio said, still laughing. "You actually did it, didn't you? You actually took over while we were busy being offended and making demands. We thought we were negotiating from strength, but you'd already won. We just didn't realize it." Reggie looked confused. This wasn't the response he'd expected. Antonio stood up, extended his hand, the handshake he'd denied weeks earlier. "You want Soho? Take it. You've earned it. My family's been living in the past, thinking our history, our name, our tradition gave us power. But power isn't about history. It's about who's strong now, who's building now, who's succeeding now. And that's you." Reggie slowly stood and shook Antonio's hand. "This isn't a trick?" "No trick. We're bowing out, gracefully, while we still can. We'll keep our restaurants, our social clubs, our legitimate businesses. The criminal operations in Soho, they're yours. Just promise me one thing." "What?" When younger guys come along in 10 years and try to take it from you the way you took it from us, remember this moment. Remember that sometimes the smart move is accepting when times have changed rather than fighting a war you can't win. Reggie nodded slowly. Deal. The two groups left the restaurant. No violence, no bloodshed, just a transfer of power handled through conversation, recognition of reality, and strategic thinking. The peaceful resolution between the Krays and the Italian families shocked London's criminal underworld. Everyone had expected war, anticipated violence, prepared for conflict. Instead, the Italians had simply acknowledged that times had changed, that the Kray twins represented a new generation, that fighting to hold on to past glory was futile. It was, in its way, more impressive than if they'd fought and lost. They'd recognized reality and adapted. That took wisdom, maturity, strategic thinking. For the Krays, the victory was total. They now controlled Soho's criminal operations. Their empire had expanded dramatically. Their reputation had grown. They were the organization that had taken territory from the legendary Italian families without firing a shot. But both Reggie and Ronald Kray remembered Antonio's final words. About younger guys coming along. About times changing. About the importance of recognizing when your era was ending. In 1968, the Krays were arrested on murder charges. Convicted in 1969. Sentenced to life in prison. Their era did end, just as the Italian family's era had ended before them. Reggie Kray, interviewed in prison in 1997, was asked about the confrontation with the Italian mob. That was the smartest thing we ever did. Not the violence, not the intimidation, but the way we handled the Italians. We didn't fight them. We just built something better, made ourselves more successful. And when they finally realized it, when Antonio acknowledged that we'd won, that was better than any victory through violence could have been. Antonio taught me something that day. Taught me that real power isn't about holding on to what you have through force. It's about adapting to change, about recognizing when times have changed and changing with them. I wish I'd remembered that lesson better in later years. Might have saved me from dying in prison. The confrontation between the Italian mob and the Kray brothers became a case study in how power transfers in criminal organizations. The Italians had assumed their history, their connections, and their tradition would intimidate the Krays into backing down. They didn't expect the Krays to have already won before the confrontation even began. Didn't expect the Krays to have built operations so successful that they'd made Italian operations obsolete. And they definitely didn't expect Antonio Sabini to be wise enough to recognize reality and step aside peacefully. Antonio Sabini lived until 1989, dying at age 71 from natural causes. He spent his later years running legitimate restaurants in London, never went to prison, never faced serious criminal charges, retired peacefully. When asked in a 1985 interview why he'd given up Soho to the Krays, Antonio said, "Because I understood something my predecessors didn't always understand. Criminal empires don't last forever. Generations change, methods change, times change. You can fight that change and die violently, or you can accept it and live peacefully." I chose life, and I don't regret it. The Kray twins confronted the Italian mob expecting a fight. The Italian mob confronted the Krays expecting submission. Neither got what they expected. Instead, they got something better. A peaceful transfer of power based on mutual recognition of reality. It was, perhaps, the most civilized moment in either organization's history. And one of the smartest. The exercise yard at Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight was crowded on the afternoon of March 23, 1976. About 60 prisoners were outside during the daily 2-hour recreation period. Some walked the perimeter. Some lifted weights in the makeshift gym area. Some stood in groups, talking, smoking, passing time. Parkhurst was a Category A prison, housing some of Britain's most dangerous criminals. Murderers, armed robbers, gangsters. Men who'd committed serious violence on the outside and continued that violence on the inside. Among them was Reginald Kray, 42 years old, 7 years into a life sentence for murder. Reggie had been convicted in 1969 for killing Jack the Hat McVitie and running an organized crime empire with his twin brother Ronald. The Kray twins were the most famous criminals in Britain. Their trial had been a media sensation. Their sentencing had made headlines around the world. And in prison, they remained celebrities, respected, feared, untouchable in the prison hierarchy. Also in the yard that day was a man named Thomas Big Tom Morrison. Tom was massive, 6 feet 5 inches tall, 320 pounds, a former enforcer for a gang in South London, convicted of multiple violent assaults. Tom had a reputation in Parkhurst for being tough, for not backing down, for using his size to intimidate other prisoners. Tom had been at Parkhurst for 3 years, had established himself as someone you didn't mess with. And Tom had a problem with the Kray twins. Resented their celebrity status. Resented that other prisoners treated them with deference. Resented that someone who was only 5'8" and maybe 165 pounds commanded more respect than Tom, who could physically dominate most men. So on March 23, 1976, at approximately 2:45 p.m., Big Tom Morrison made a decision that would change his life. He walked over to where Reggie Kray was standing, and he said something about Violet Kray, Reggie's mother. Something disrespectful, something insulting, something that every prisoner within earshot knew was a death sentence. This is the story of what happened in the 15 seconds after Big Tom insulted Reggie Kray's mother. The story of how a 320-pound enforcer learned that size means nothing against a man who grew up street fighting in East London and who would kill to defend his mother's honor. And the story of why, after that day, no prisoner in Parkhurst ever made the mistake of disrespecting the Kray name again. Because Reggie Kray proved something in those 15 seconds that became legend throughout Britain's prison system. You never, ever insult a Kray twin's mother. Not if you want to remain conscious. To understand what happened in that exercise yard, you need to understand prison hierarchy in 1970s Britain, particularly at Parkhurst. Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight was opened in 1838. By the 1970s, it housed approximately 500 of Britain's most dangerous criminals. Category A prisoners. Men serving life sentences for murder. Men who'd escaped from other prisons. Men considered too dangerous for standard facilities. In prison, a hierarchy exists that's separate from the official institutional structure. Guards and administrators run the prison officially. But among prisoners, different rules apply. Respect is earned through reputation, violence, connections, and most importantly, through demonstrated willingness to defend your status. At the top of Parkhurst's prisoner hierarchy, in 1976 were the Kray twins. Reggie and Ronnie had been at Parkhurst since 1972, when they were transferred from other facilities. Their reputation from the outside followed them inside. Everyone knew who they were, what they'd done, the empire they'd built in London, the murders they'd committed. But prison reputation isn't just about what you did on the outside. It's about how you conduct yourself inside. Do you back down from confrontations? Do you allow disrespect? Do you maintain the standards that made you dangerous on the streets? The Kray twins maintained those standards absolutely. They didn't start fights unnecessarily, didn't bully weaker prisoners, but they also never backed down, never allowed disrespect, and never, under any circumstances, allowed anyone to disrespect their mother. Violet Kray was sacred to both twins. She visited regularly, brought them home-cooked food, wrote letters constantly. The twins' love for their mother was well known, and smart prisoners understood that mentioning Violet Kray in any negative context was suicide. Big Tom Morrison was not a smart prisoner. Thomas Morrison was born in 1941 in Brixton, South London. Grew up poor, large from childhood. By his teenage years, Tom was already over 6 feet tall and 250 pounds. Used his size to dominate other kids. Got into constant fights. By his 20s, Tom was working as an enforcer for various South London gangs. His specialty was intimidation, collections, beatings. He wasn't sophisticated, wasn't strategic, just big and willing to hurt people. That was enough to make him valuable to criminal organizations that needed muscle. Tom was convicted in 1971 of assault causing grievous bodily harm. He'd beaten a man so severely that the victim spent 2 months in hospital with a broken jaw, shattered cheekbone, and brain trauma. Tom received a 15-year sentence, was sent to Parkhurst in 1973. At Parkhurst, Tom established himself through violence, beat up several prisoners who challenged him, used his size to take commissary items from weaker inmates, built a reputation as someone you didn't mess with unless you wanted a trip to the prison hospital. But Tom had a fundamental misunderstanding about prison violence. He thought size was what mattered. Thought being the biggest, strongest man in a room meant you were the most dangerous. He didn't understand that in prison, especially in a place like Parkhurst, filled with killers and gangsters. Size meant nothing compared to skill, reputation, and willingness to do whatever was necessary. Tom also had resentment issues. He resented that the Kray twins, despite being smaller than him, commanded more respect. Resented that other prisoners deferred to them. Resented that Tom's size and strength didn't give him the status he thought he deserved. In March 1976, that resentment finally overrode Tom's limited common sense, and he made a decision that would cost him dearly. The confrontation on March 23, 1976, didn't come from nowhere. There'd been tension between Tom Morrison and the Kray twins for weeks. It started in early March when Tom made a comment in the dining hall. loud enough for multiple prisoners to hear. "The Krays! Everyone acts like they're royalty. They're just two small guys who got lucky on the outside. In here, they're nothing special." Word of the comment reached Reggie within hours. Everything that happens in prison reaches everyone else quickly. Reggie didn't respond directly, didn't confront Tom, just filed the information away, noted that Tom was testing boundaries. A week later, Tom did it again, this time in the library. Made a comment about how the Krays got special treatment, how guards let them have visitors whenever they wanted, how they got better food. "Prison royalty," Tom said mockingly, "like they're special." Again, Reggie didn't respond. But other prisoners were watching, wondering if the Krays had gone soft, wondering if Reggie would let this challenge to his status continue unanswered. Then, on March 23rd, Tom escalated. In the exercise yard, in front of dozens of witnesses. Tom walked over to where Reggie was standing with two other prisoners, said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I heard your mum was here visiting yesterday, bringing you food like you're still a little boy. Must be nice having Mummy take care of you. Even in prison, you need your mummy." The yard went quiet. Prisoners within earshot stopped what they were doing, because everyone knew. You don't talk about Violet Kray. You don't insult her. You don't even mention her in a disrespectful context. That was the line you never crossed with the Kray twins. Reggie turned slowly to face Tom. His expression didn't change, didn't show anger, didn't show emotion, just looked at Tom with complete focus. "What did you just say?" Tom, emboldened by the audience and his size advantage, repeated it. "I said you're a mummy's boy, even in prison. 42 years old, and still need your mummy to bring you food. Pathetic." Reggie smiled, the same dangerous smile that people who knew him had learned to fear. "You got one chance to take that back, to apologize. Right now, or I'm going to hurt you very badly." Tom laughed, looked around at the other prisoners watching. "You? You're going to hurt me? Look at you. You're tiny. I could break you in half." "Last chance," Reggie said quietly. "Apologize." Tom took a step closer to Reggie, using his size to intimidate, towering over Reggie. "I don't apologize to Mummy's boys." That was the last thing Tom said before Reggie moved. What happened next lasted approximately 15 seconds, maybe 20. But to everyone watching, it seemed both faster and longer. Faster because Reggie's movements were so quick that witnesses later disagreed about the sequence. Longer because the violence was so comprehensive that it felt like it should have taken more time than it actually did. Reggie's first move was a punch to Tom's solar plexus, below the ribs, a spot that causes the diaphragm to spasm and breathing to stop momentarily. The punch was perfectly placed, delivered with full body weight behind it, despite Reggie being 8 inches shorter than Tom. Tom's breath exploded out of him. He doubled over reflexively. His guard dropped. Reggie followed immediately with an uppercut to Tom's chin. Reggie had been an amateur boxer in his youth, had won multiple titles, still trained regularly in prison. The uppercut snapped Tom's head back. Tom's legs went weak. Tom tried to grab Reggie, to use his size advantage, to wrap Reggie up and use his strength, but Reggie sidestepped, delivered 2 quick body shots to Tom's kidneys. Precise, professional, the kind of punches that don't look devastating, but cause enormous internal pain. Tom swung wildly, a haymaker that would have knocked Reggie unconscious if it had connected. But Reggie slipped under the punch, countered with a hook to Tom's liver. The liver shot was the beginning of the end. The liver is one of the most painful places to be hit. Tom's legs buckled completely. He dropped to one knee, gasping, trying to breathe. Reggie didn't stop, delivered a knee strike to Tom's face, broke Tom's nose, blood immediately pouring down Tom's chin. Tom fell forward onto his hands, on all fours now, completely defensive, no longer attacking, just trying to protect himself. Reggie grabbed Tom's head, pulled it up, looked Tom in the eyes, said clearly enough that prisoners 20 feet away could hear, "You don't talk about my mother, ever, you understand?" Tom nodded weakly, blood running down his face, barely conscious. Reggie released Tom's head, let him fall face first onto the concrete, turned and walked away. The entire fight had lasted 15 seconds, maybe 20. Tom Morrison, 320 pounds, 6'5", a man who'd built his reputation on size and intimidation, was lying on the ground, bleeding, broken, destroyed by a man 8 inches shorter and 150 pounds lighter. Guards rushed into the exercise yard, saw Tom on the ground, saw Reggie walking away, saw 60 prisoners standing around, watching silently. "What happened?" the senior guard demanded. No one answered. Not one of the 60 witnesses. Not even the prisoners who'd been standing right next to the fight. Because this was prison business. You don't talk to guards about prison business. Not if you want to survive. The guards took Tom to the prison hospital. He had a broken nose, fractured jaw, severe bruising to his torso and face, and mild concussion. He'd need medical treatment, stitches, pain medication, would be in the hospital wing for at least a week. The guards also took Reggie to solitary confinement, standard procedure after a fight. They couldn't prove Reggie had attacked Tom. None of the witnesses would confirm it, but Reggie's knuckles were scraped, and Tom had obviously been beaten. Reggie was placed in solitary for 30 days, pending investigation. Reggie didn't resist, didn't complain, just went to solitary quietly, because he'd accomplished what he needed to accomplish. He'd sent a message, not just to Tom, but to every prisoner at Parkhurst. The Kray name commanded respect. Insult that name, especially insult Violet Kray, and there were immediate, violent consequences. Size didn't matter. Numbers didn't matter. Reputation was everything. Tom Morrison spent 7 days in the prison hospital. His physical injuries healed over several weeks. Broken nose, fractured jaw that had to be wired shut, ribs that were badly bruised, though not broken, extensive bruising throughout his torso. But Tom's reputation never recovered. The damage to his status in Parkhurst's prisoner hierarchy was permanent. Before the fight, Tom had been feared, respected for his size and willingness to use violence. Other prisoners avoided confronting him, gave him space, acknowledged his status. After the fight, Tom was a joke. Prisoners openly mocked him. "Big Tom? Yeah, he's big. Big enough to get knocked out by someone a foot shorter than him. Big enough to get destroyed in 15 seconds. The story spread throughout Parkhurst within hours, then spread to other prisons through prisoner transfers and letters. Within months, everyone in Britain's prison system knew Big Tom Morrison had insulted Reggie Kray's mother, and Reggie had destroyed him in seconds. Tom tried to rebuild his reputation, got into fights with other prisoners, won some through sheer size, but he could never escape the stigma, never regain the status he'd had before challenging Reggie. In 1978, Tom was transferred to a different prison, partly for his own safety, partly because his presence at Parkhurst had become a constant reminder of what happens when you disrespect the Krays. He served the remainder of his sentence at multiple facilities, was released in 1986 after 15 years total. Tom Morrison died in 1999 at age 58 from liver cirrhosis. Alcoholic, broke, forgotten by everyone except as a cautionary tale in prison lore. The man who'd challenged Reggie Kray and learned in 15 seconds that size means nothing against skill, experience, and absolute willingness to defend family honor. Reggie spent 30 days in solitary confinement, standard punishment for fighting. Guards questioned him repeatedly about what had happened. Reggie's response never varied. "I was walking in the yard. Tom Morrison fell down. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he tripped." The guards knew Reggie was lying. But without witnesses willing to testify, without video evidence, they couldn't prove anything. They released Reggie from solitary after 30 days. Reggie returned to general population. When he walked into the common area, prisoners applauded. Not openly. That would have been too obvious to guards. But quietly. A slow clap that acknowledged what Reggie had done. That recognized his defense of his mother's honor. That confirmed his status at the top of Parkhurst's hierarchy. For Reggie, the 30 days in solitary was worth it. The fight with Tom had accomplished multiple things. Defended his mother's honor, the most important goal. No one would insult Violet Kray again. Not in Reggie's presence. Not anywhere word could get back to him. Re-established dominance. Tom's weeks of testing boundaries had challenged Reggie's status. The fight ended that challenge definitively. No one would question the Kray's position again. Demonstrated skill over size. The fight showed that Reggie, despite being smaller than many prisoners, was more dangerous than bigger men. That his boxing training, his street fighting experience, his absolute focus made him unbeatable in the kind of short, brutal confrontations that define prison violence. Reinforced the code. Reggie had warned Tom, given him multiple chances to back down, only fought when Tom refused to apologize. This showed Reggie was fair, but unforgiving, would give you an opportunity to avoid violence, but once violence started, would end it decisively. Reggie's twin brother Ronald was also at Parkhurst in 1976. The twins were housed in different wings, but saw each other regularly during recreation periods and at meals. When Ronnie heard about the fight with Tom Morrison, and he heard about it within an hour of it happening, his reaction was immediate pride. According to another prisoner who was present when Ronnie learned about the fight, Ronnie said, "That's my brother. That's my twin. You insult our mother, you pay the price. Size doesn't matter. Tom learned that. Everyone learned that. And now no one will make that mistake again." Ronnie wanted to confront Tom himself when Tom returned from the hospital. Wanted to send an additional message. But Reggie told him no. Told him the message had been sent. Tom had been dealt with. No need for additional violence. This showed another dimension of Reggie's character. He wasn't interested in excessive violence. Wasn't interested in prolonged punishment. Just in swift, decisive responses to disrespect. Once the response was delivered, once the message was sent, the matter was over. The twins' relationship with their mother was central to their identities. Violet Kray had raised them in poverty in East London, had stood by them through their criminal careers, had visited them in prison regularly, had never abandoned them despite their crimes. Both twins loved her absolutely, and both would kill to defend her honor. The fight with Tom Morrison was just one example, but it was the most dramatic, the most public, the one that became legend, because witnesses saw a 320-pound man destroyed in 15 seconds by someone half his size, all because he'd made a comment about the Kray twins' mother. The guards at Parkhurst knew what had happened in the exercise yard on March 23, 1976. Knew Reggie had beaten Tom. Knew why. But they couldn't officially acknowledge it because no witnesses would confirm it. One guard, speaking anonymously in a 1985 interview years after retiring, said, "Everyone knew Reggie destroyed Tom Morrison. Everyone knew it was because Tom had insulted Mrs. Kray. But not one prisoner would testify to it. Not one would confirm what happened. That's the code. Prison business stays prison business. Guards don't get involved unless absolutely necessary." The guard continued, "And honestly, most of us thought Tom had it coming. You don't insult a man's mother, especially not a man like Reggie Kray, who'd killed people on the outside for lesser offenses. Tom was stupid, thought his size would protect him. Learned the hard way that size means nothing against someone who knows how to fight." The guards at Parkhurst developed a policy after the incident. They informally warned new prisoners about the Kray twins. Told them, not officially but in private conversations, that the twins were to be left alone. That challenging them was suicide. That insulting their mother was a death wish. This wasn't official policy. Wasn't written down anywhere. But it was passed from guard to guard. A practical recognition that maintaining peace in Parkhurst required acknowledging the prisoner hierarchy and the specific lines you didn't cross. The fight between Reggie Kray and Big Tom Morrison became one of the most famous prison incidents in British history. The story was told and retold, embellished, exaggerated, but the core truth remained. A 320-pound man insulted Reggie Kray's mother. 15 seconds later, he was on the ground, broken and bleeding. The incident demonstrated several things about Reggie Kray's character. Loyalty to family. Above all else, above his own safety, above prison rules, Reggie would defend his mother's honor. This loyalty was absolute, non-negotiable. Fighting skill. Reggie's boxing training and street fighting experience made him more dangerous than men twice his size. He understood angles, timing, vulnerable targets. Fought with precision rather than just aggression. Controlled violence. Reggie didn't kill Tom. Didn't permanently disable him. Just hurt him enough to send the message. This showed restraint combined with brutality. Calculated violence rather than uncontrolled rage. Prison politics. Reggie understood how to maintain status in prison. The fight wasn't just about defending his mother. It was about reinforcing his position at the top of the prisoner hierarchy. About ensuring no one would challenge the Kray name again. The story also became a cautionary tale. Guards told it to news. Prisoners told it to each other. The lesson was clear. Don't test the Kray twins. Don't challenge their status. And never, under any circumstances, say anything disrespectful about Violet Kray. In later years, after Reggie was released from prison in 2000, he was released on compassionate grounds due to terminal cancer and died just weeks later. Various people who'd been at Parkhurst in 1976, gave interviews about the incident. One prisoner said, "I was 20 feet away when it happened. Saw the whole thing." Reggie gave Tom multiple chances to apologize, multiple warnings. Tom didn't take them, thought he was tough. Then Reggie moved, and it was over before it started. I'd never seen anything like it. A big man destroyed by a smaller man in seconds. It was like watching a professional boxer fight an amateur. The skill difference was that obvious. Another prisoner said, "After that fight, nobody talked about the Krays disrespectfully. Nobody tested them. Nobody challenged their status." The message was sent and received, and Tom spent the rest of his time at Parkhurst as a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when you cross the wrong people. Violet Kray died on August 4th, 1982, at age 73. Both Reggie and Ronnie were given temporary release to attend her funeral, heavily guarded and in handcuffs, but they were there. It was the last time the twins would be outside prison walls together. At the funeral, Reggie reportedly said to another mourner, "Everything I did, every fight, every time I defended our family's honor, it was for her. She deserved respect. She deserved protection. And I made sure she had it. Always." The fight with Big Tom Morrison in 1976 was just one example of that protection. One moment where Reggie Kray demonstrated that defending his mother's honor was worth any consequence. Worth solitary confinement. Worth violence. Worth everything. Big Tom Morrison insulted Violet Kray on March the 23rd, 1976. 15 seconds later, he was unconscious on the ground. And for the rest of his life, Tom carried the memory of those 15 seconds. The memory of realizing, too late, that size means nothing. That reputation is everything. And that you never, ever insult a Kray twins' mother. The breakfast tray hit the floor with a loud crash. Scrambled eggs, toast, and tea spread across the concrete in a mess of yellow, brown, and liquid. Every inmate in the dining hall at Parkhurst Prison turned to look. Some were hoping for violence. Others were just grateful for any entertainment in the monotony of prison life. It was March 8th, 1976. Reggie Kray had been in prison for 7 years, serving a life sentence for murder. He was 42 years old, kept in shape through constant exercise, and despite the circumstances, maintained the same dignified demeanor he'd had on the outside. He wore his prison uniform like it was a tailored suit, kept his hair neat, carried himself with the pride of someone who knew he was still Reggie Kray, even behind bars. The guard who'd knocked the tray from Reggie's hands was named William Billy Thompson. He was 38 years old, had worked at Parkhurst for 12 years, and had a reputation for being a bully. Billy enjoyed having power over men who'd once been powerful. Enjoyed reminding them they were prisoners now, nobodies, just numbers in the system. "Pick it up," Billy said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You dropped your breakfast. Clean it up. Now." Reggie looked at the mess on the floor, then looked up at Billy and smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a fake smile, a genuine, calm smile. The same smile he'd used before destroying Tommy Morrison in the street. The smile that people who knew him had learned to fear. "You knocked it out of my hands. Reggie said quietly. So you clean it up. The dining hall went completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every inmate turned to watch. Because what Reggie had just said was unthinkable. Prisoners didn't talk back to guards, didn't refuse direct orders, didn't challenge authority. That's how you ended up in solitary confinement. Or worse. Billy's face turned red. What did you just say to me? I said you knocked my breakfast out of my hands, so you clean it up. Not your servant. I'm not your dog. I'm a prisoner, yes, but I'm still Reggie Kray, and I don't clean up messes I didn't make. This is the story of what happened when a prison guard tried to humiliate Reggie Kray in front of the entire prison population. The story of how Reggie responded, not with immediate violence, but with something more calculated, more devastating, and more permanent. And the story of why, 3 months later, Billy Thompson would beg for a transfer to a different prison, terrified for his life, despite being surrounded by guards and security. Billy Thompson had been planning this confrontation for weeks. He'd watched Reggie Kray move through the prison with the same confidence he'd had as a mob boss in London, watched other inmates show him respect, watched him maintain his dignity despite being locked up. And it irritated Billy. He believed that prisoners, especially famous ones like Reggie Kray, needed to be broken, needed to understand they were nothing anymore, that their reputation, their past, their pride meant nothing inside prison walls. So Billy had been looking for an opportunity, a moment when he could publicly humiliate Reggie, make him look weak, show the other prisoners that even Reggie Kray could be reduced to nothing. The breakfast tray had been that opportunity. Now, standing in the silent dining hall with every inmate watching, Billy had to make a choice. He could back down, admit he'd knocked the tray deliberately, apologize, walk away. That would be the smart move, the de-escalating move. Or he could double down, assert his authority, show Reggie and everyone else who really had power in this place. Billy chose to double down. You refusing a direct order? Billy said. That's insubordination. That's time in solitary. That's more charges added to your sentence. Now pick up that mess before I make this worse for you. Reggie remained sitting. The smile never left his face. No. Last chance, Kray. Pick it up. No. Billy grabbed Reggie by the arm, tried to yank him to his feet. But Reggie was strong. All those years of training, even in prison. Billy couldn't budge him. That's when 3 more guards rushed over. They grabbed Reggie, lifted him from his seat, forced him to his knees in front of the spilled breakfast. Clean it up, Billy ordered, with your hands, like the animal you are. Still, Reggie refused. Just knelt there, looking up at Billy, smiling. Fine, Billy said. Solitary confinement. 30 days. Maybe that'll teach you some respect. The guards dragged Reggie away. He didn't resist. Just let them take him. That same calm smile on his face. Like he knew something Billy didn't. Like this was all going according to a plan Billy couldn't see. Solitary confinement at Parkhurst was brutal. A small cell. No windows, no contact with other prisoners. 1 hour of exercise daily in a small yard. The rest of the time, just you and your thoughts. Most prisoners went crazy after a few days. Started talking to themselves, hallucinating, breaking down psychologically. The isolation was designed to be punishing, designed to break you. But Reggie had been preparing for this possibility since the day he arrived at Parkhurst. He'd known that eventually a guard would try something, would push too far, would create a situation where Reggie would have to respond. So Reggie had planned, thought about what he'd do if a guard tried to humiliate him, how he'd respond, what tools he had available even in the restricted environment of maximum security prison. The answer was simple: information and influence. Reggie had spent 7 years building relationships in Parkhurst, not just with other prisoners, though he had plenty of those, but with certain guards who could be corrupted, who wanted money, who had gambling debts, or drinking problems, or financial difficulties, who could be convinced to do small favors for the right price. Reggie also had resources on the outside. His twin brother Ronald was in a different prison, but could make phone calls. Friends and associates from the old days were still loyal. Money was still available. The Kray organization might be dismantled, but the network of people who owed the Krays favors still existed. During his first week in solitary, Reggie thought about Billy Thompson, about what made Billy vulnerable, about how to hurt him without using violence, because violence would be expected, would be defended against, would result in more punishment for Reggie. No, this required something different, something psychological, something that would destroy Billy's sense of security without Reggie ever laying a hand on him. By the end of his first week in solitary, Reggie had a plan. Reggie sent word to his brother Ronald through a system they'd developed. Coded messages passed through visiting family members. The message was simple: find out everything about prison guard William Thompson at Parkhurst. Everything. Ronald got the message, made some calls, put some people to work. Within 2 weeks, Ronald's people had compiled a comprehensive file on Billy Thompson. Personal information: married to a woman named Sarah, 2 children, ages 9 and 12, lived in a semi-detached house in Newport, about 40 miles from Parkhurst, drove a 10-year-old Ford. Salary was decent, but not great, about £8,000 annually. Financial situation: Billy had debts, gambling debts specifically. He liked betting on horses, wasn't very good at it, owed approximately £3,000 to various bookmakers, roughly 4 months of his salary. Vulnerabilities: Billy's wife didn't know about the gambling debts. He'd been hiding them from her, making minimum payments, struggling to keep up. The stress was affecting his marriage. Sarah had noticed Billy was irritable, distant, drinking more than usual. Associates: Billy had a brother named Frank, who was also a prison guard at a different facility. The brothers were close. Billy also had a friend named Gary, who worked as a prison guard at Parkhurst. They'd started the job around the same time, often worked the same shifts. This information was gold. Ronald sent it back to Reggie through the same coded system. When Reggie received this information, in his third week of solitary confinement, he smiled. The same smile he'd used in the dining hall. The smile that meant he'd found his angle. On Reggie's 28th day in solitary confinement, 2 days before his scheduled release back into general population, Billy Thompson received a phone call at home. It was 10 p.m., after his shift at the prison. "Mr. Thompson," an unfamiliar voice said. "Yes." "Who's this?" "A friend. I'm calling to let you know that we're aware of your financial situation, the gambling debts, the 3,000 pounds you owe, the fact that your wife doesn't know about it." Billy's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Like I said, a friend. And friends help each other. We can make your debt go away." All 3,000 pounds paid off. Clean slate. Your wife never has to know. Why would you do that? Because we want something small in return. A favor. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. Just a small favor. What favor? We'll let you know soon. For now, just know that your debt is being handled. You'll get a call from your bookmakers in the next few days. They'll confirm that your balance is 0. Consider it a gift. No strings attached. Yet. The line went dead. Billy sat there, phone in hand, shaking. Someone knew about his debts, knew about his secret, knew where he lived. And they'd called him at home, after hours, making it clear they could reach him anywhere. 3 days later, Billy's primary bookmaker called him. "Hey, Billy, good news. Someone paid off your account. 3 grand. Completely cleared. Don't know who, don't know why, but you're square with us." Billy felt relief and terror simultaneously. Relief that the crushing debt was gone. Terror about what he'd have to do to pay it back. Reggie Kray was released from solitary confinement on April 7th, 1976, exactly 30 days after being sent there. He walked back into general population, looking the same as he had going in. Calm, composed, dignified. Other prisoners welcomed him back, asked if he was okay, expressed respect for how he'd handled Billy Thompson. Word had spread throughout the prison about the confrontation, about how Reggie had refused to be humiliated, about how he'd been dragged to solitary, still smiling. Billy Thompson saw Reggie return to general population, watched him walk through the common area, surrounded by other inmates who clearly respected him. And Billy wondered, was Reggie behind the phone call, behind the debt being paid off? He didn't have to wonder long. 2 days after Reggie's return, Billy received another phone call at home. Same unfamiliar voice. "Mr. Thompson, time to discuss that favor. What do you want?" "Nothing dramatic. Just this. Stop harassing Reggie. Kray, don't seek him out. Don't create problems for him. Don't try to humiliate him again. Just treat him like any other prisoner. Fair treatment. Nothing more, nothing less." That's it? That's the favor? That's it. Simple. Right? You stop being a bully. to one specific prisoner, and we consider your debt paid." Billy was quiet. "And if I don't?" "Then we make another call. This one to your wife. We tell her about the gambling, about the debts, about how close you came to losing everything. We show her the records, the betting slips, everything. Your marriage ends. Your kids grow up in a broken home, all because you couldn't stop picking on one prisoner. Is that worth it?" Billy closed his eyes. "I'll leave him alone." "Smart choice. We'll be watching. Remember that." The line went dead. After that phone call, Billy Thompson's behavior toward Reggie Kray changed completely. He stopped making eye contact with Reggie, avoided being on the same shifts when he had to interact with Reggie during counts, during meal times. He was scrupulously professional. No harassment, no bullying, no attempts at humiliation. Other guards noticed. Other prisoners noticed. And everyone drew the same conclusion. Somehow Reggie Kray had gotten to Billy Thompson, had figured out a way to neutralize him, had won without using violence. But Billy's troubles weren't all, because now other prisoners saw that Billy could be intimidated, saw that he was vulnerable, and they started testing him. A prisoner would refuse an order. Billy would back down instead of enforcing it. Another prisoner would talk back. Billy would ignore it instead of punishing it. Billy's authority was eroding. His reputation as a tough, no-nonsense guard was gone, replaced by the image of someone who could be broken. By May 1976, Billy was having panic attacks before shifts, was drinking heavily after work, was seeing shadows where there weren't any, was terrified that some associate of the Krays, was watching his house, following his family, waiting for him to make a mistake. His wife, Sarah, noticed something was wrong. "Billy, what's going on? You're different, distant, scared. Talk to me." "I can't," Billy said. "I just need to get through this. Get through each day." In June 1976, Billy Thompson requested a transfer to a different prison. Told his supervisors he needed a change of environment. The transfer was approved for September. But 3 months felt like an eternity to Billy. 3 months of working in the same prison as Reggie Kray. 3 months of seeing that knowing smile every time their paths crossed. 3 months of wondering if today would be the day someone decided to hurt him. On September 15th, 1976, Billy Thompson worked his last shift at Parkhurst Prison. He was transferring to Albany Prison on the Isle of Wight, still a maximum security facility, but one without Reggie Kray. On his final day, Billy was walking through a corridor when he encountered Reggie. They were alone, just the two of them. No other guards, no other prisoners. Billy froze. This was his nightmare scenario. Alone with Reggie Kray. Vulnerable. But Reggie didn't attack him, didn't threaten him, just stopped walking and looked at Billy calmly. "I heard you're transferring," Reggie said. "Yes. Tomorrow." "Good. Fresh start. That's good." Billy didn't say anything, just stood there, waiting for whatever was coming. "You know why this happened to you?" Reggie asked. "Why you went from confident to terrified in 6 months?" "Because I humiliated you." "No, because you tried to break me. You saw me maintaining my dignity, and it bothered you. You thought that by humiliating me in front of other prisoners, you'd show everyone that reputation doesn't matter. That past power doesn't matter. That in here, you're in charge. But you forgot something. Dignity isn't about circumstances. It's about who you are. You can take away my freedom. You can lock me in a cell. You can put me in solitary confinement. But you can't take away who I am. Can't make me less than myself. That's the lesson you learned these past 6 months. And here's the thing. I never wanted to hurt you. Never wanted to destroy you. All I wanted was for you to treat me with basic respect. Like a human being. Not like an animal you could abuse. If you'd done that from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Billy found his voice. You ruined my life. No, I changed your behavior. Your life is fine. Your debt is paid. Your wife still doesn't know. Your job is secure. You're just scared now. Scared of what could happen if you go back to being a bully. That fear, that's what's going to make you a better prison guard. Better person. You're going to treat prisoners with respect now. Not because you like them, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. And honestly, that's good enough. Reggie walked away, leaving Billy standing in the corridor. Billy Thompson spent the rest of his career as a prison guard at Albany Prison. He retired in 1994 after 32 years in the prison service. Never had another major incident. Never bullied another prisoner. Treated everyone with professional distance and basic respect. His wife, Sarah, never learned about the gambling debts or what happened with Reggie Kray. Billy's marriage survived. His kids grew up normal. He lived a quiet life. But he never forgot those 6 months in 1976. Never forgot the feeling of being utterly powerless, despite being the one with authority. Never forgot Reggie Kray's smile in the dining hall, the smile that had predicted everything that would happen next. Reggie Kray remained at Parkhurst Prison until 1979, when he was transferred to other facilities. He was finally released in 2000, just weeks before his death from cancer. He spent 31 years in prison total. In a 1998 interview, Reggie was asked about the incident with Billy Thompson. That was one of the most satisfying things I did in prison. Not because I hurt him, I didn't, but because I taught him something. Taught him that power isn't about position or authority. It's about understanding people, finding their vulnerabilities, using information instead of violence. Billy thought he had power because he wore a uniform, because he had keys, because he could punish prisoners. But real power is making someone change their behavior without ever touching them. That's what I did. And Billy learned the lesson. Became a better guard because of it. In a strange way, I did him a favor. Do you regret it? What you put him through? Reggie thought for a moment. No, He earned it. He tried to break me, tried to humiliate me in front of the entire prison. That required a response. I could have had him beaten. That would have been easy to arrange. But that would have made me no better than him. Instead, I made him afraid, made him understand what it feels like to be powerless. That was better, more educational, more permanent. The story of Reggie Kray and Billy Thompson became legendary in British prisons. A story about what happens when someone tries to break an unbreakable man. About the difference between authority and power. About how intelligence beats position. And whenever the story was told, people always mentioned the smile. That calm, knowing smile Reggie had in the dining hall right after Billy knocked his breakfast tray to the floor. The smile that said, "You just made a terrible mistake. You don't know it yet. But you will." That smile haunted Billy Thompson for the rest of his life. Appeared in his dreams sometimes. A reminder that some people like Reggie Kray, carry their power inside themselves, and no amount of external authority can take that away. Prison guard William Thompson tried to humiliate Reggie Kray. Reggie smiled, then systematically destroyed Billy's sense of security without ever using violence. Just information. Just pressure. Just fear. And that was worse than any beating could have been. That wraps it up for today. March 1976. Parkhurst Prison. Guard Billy Thompson knocked Reggie Kray's breakfast tray to the floor. Demanded Reggie clean it up like an animal. Reggie refused. Smiled. Got dragged to solitary. 30 days. But during those 30 days, Reggie's people investigated Billy, found his gambling debts, paid them off, then called Billy at home. Made it clear. Leave Reggie alone, or your wife learns everything. Billy's confidence shattered. His authority evaporated. 3 months later, he begged for a transfer. Spent the rest of his career terrified. Because Billy learned the hard way. You don't humiliate Reggie Kray. Ever. Even in prison. Especially in prison. If this story amazed you, drop a comment below. Subscribe for more stories where intelligence beats authority. See you in the next one.